Last but not least, I'd like to recognize Ms. Tartak. Yes.
There's a Jewish concept that encourages bringing light into times of darkness through acts of loving kindness. So I'll begin by dropping a few coins into this charity box, and I would encourage you to do the same. Distinguished members of the subcommittee, good morning. My name is Sahar Tartak, and I am an Orthodox Persian Jewish student at Yale University. Thank you for having me speak. It is an honor, and I appreciate your service to this country. I am humbled before you. Noting your commitment to democracy and the free world, I want to paint a picture of how, since Hamas's October 7th massacres, college campuses have become a place for the opposite, a love of Hamas and all the oppression it represents. Since October 7th, there has been a 400% increase in reported anti-Semitic incidents of vandalism, harassment, and assault in comparison to the same time frame in the previous year across America. Let's start with Yale, my own university where I received death threats for my Jewish activism, and the Ivy League institution refuses to provide me with direct protection. That's just the beginning. I haven't had time to mourn the murder of over 1,400 members of my Jewish family across the sea. I haven't had time to cry. I've been too busy handling an interdepartmentally sponsored Yale event entitled, quote, Gaza Under Siege. My Jewish friends and I were barred from entry. We pressed our ears against the door for 2 hours listening, quote, the Israeli state cannot remain the state of the Jewish people. Quote, Israel aims to inflict as much harm, damage, and death as possible. Quote, Panelists refused to label Hamas, quote, terrorists, let alone to condemn them when asked. They instead justified their brutalities, saying, quote, violent resistance movements often emerge in colonized spaces. An official Yale University response declared that, quote, opinions and positions from people of all backgrounds were expressed respectfully during the program, but we heard nothing of the sort from behind the door. The week before that, I also didn't have time to cry. I was too busy with the Yale Daily News, the oldest collegiate paper in the country, redacting my mention of Hamas's raping women and beheading men from an article I published for the paper, deeming these atrocities unsubstantiated. Yale's administration made no comment. The week before that, I didn't have time to cry because I went to film one of many pro-Hamas protests at Yale where hundreds of my peers gleefully yelled, quote, resistance is justified. Yale's administration made no comment. The week before that, I wrote an article about the officially recognized campus group Yalees for Palestine publicly, quote, celebrating the resistance's success. Not to mention similar statements made by university professors. Again, the Yale University administration did nothing. Again, I didn't have time to cry. On campus, I sit in a crowded dining hall, and I ask myself, how many people in this room want me dead? You have no doubt heard about assaults and intimidation of Jewish students at Cornell, Columbia, and Cooper Union. You've heard about the words, glory to our martyrs, projected onto George Washington University's library. Those Jews also didn't have time to cry. You may not, however, have heard about my Jewish friend, a freshman whose residential counselor laughed contemptuously at a survivor of the Nova Music Festival massacre for visiting their university to detail his trauma. Others told me they're uncomfortable approaching their own professors for help with coursework because they're openly pro-Hamas. Another slept on a friend's couch because her roommate supports Hamas. One attended a seemingly innocent dance concert whose program featured a donation link to, quote, support Palestinian anarchist fighters on the front lines of resistance. I wonder where that was going. They've all receded into Jewish centers exclusively for reasons which are crystal clear. Universities have allowed Jew hatred to run rampant. If they fail to protect their Jewish students, they should be stripped of their federal funding. They must derecognize and defund student groups that promote violence, calling for, quote, intifada, or supporting U.S. designated terrorist organizations. The federal government cannot subsidize hotbeds of anti-Semitism. The Department of Education should proactively open Title VI investigations, not just receive them passively. Diversity, equity, and inclusion offices should be scrutinized for protecting every minority group other than mine. This is not an exhaustive list, but I urge you to mobilize on this issue. Do not abandon your Jewish students during this crisis. Academia has turned its back on us. Will you do the same?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pursuant to the previous order,